What a great session. Thank you so much, our panelists and also moderator. Thank you so much, Kun Waraporn Osathapan, Senior Executive Vice President from Siam Kubota, and also Amit Noam from Agritas Israel, and Dr. Panachit Gitti Panyangam from Z-Trust or Acumet Company Limited. Now, ladies and gentlemen, what a great session, combining with the three specialists from both agriculture machinery world and the startup world. For Agritas, they wish to provide an ecosystem to increase the productivity by overcoming the pain points, which are so many in this agricultural world, whether it be the food and beverage lacks of visibility across the food value chain. More than that, though the ecosystem wants to communicate or help the farmers by bringing in the technology, it is difficult sometimes to do so in certain conditions. And more than that, they also try to help easing the unpredictable supply for the farmers worldwide and also getting rid of the non-sustainable practices that has been going on in years. For Kubota side, they said agriculture accounts for 89% of the GDP in Thailand. Farmers only own small piece of lands, face climate challenges, and also high household debt, price uncertainty, and low negotiation power. So these are all the things that Thai farmers have been facing throughout the years. Bringing in technology will definitely help them with this condition, help them increase the productivity, and help them increase the revenue. Now, ladies and gentlemen, next session will be the topic of nature of and nurture, biodiversity capital for food security. We are so very honored and happy to have our executive and also the speakers joining us today. Please welcome the first speaker, Director of the Knowledge Base Program for Nature, Inclusive and Landscape from Wageningen University and Research from the Netherlands, Dr. Lawrence Jones Walters. Next is Managing Director from Siam Forestry Company Limited, Kun Mahasan Thieravarut. Last but not least, from Plant Operations Director, Cargill Meats Thailand, Dr. Nutthabordee Chaimanee. Please welcome.
Thank you very much. I hope that you can hear me.
Yes.
Very good. Okay, so good morning from the Netherlands and good afternoon to you on Thailand time. I'm happy to be here to talk to you about biodiversity capital for food security, and very soon we'll introduce our two speakers. Please may I have the next slide. Okay, please may I have the next slide. Yes, thank you. So, as you heard, I'm Dr. Lawrence Jones Walters from Wageningen University, and I will talk to you specifically about biodiversity for food and agriculture. And we have two distinguished speakers, Mr. Nutthabordee Chaimanee from Cargill Meats, who will talk about biodiversity capital and food security, and Mr. Mahasan Thieravarut, who is Managing Director at Siam Forestry, who will talk about preserving biodiversity at Siam Forestry. And then we'll have a panel debate, and I invite you to place your questions in the chat as we go along, and I will pick them up and pass them to the speakers and answer them myself if that is appropriate. So, without further delay, may I have the next slide, and I will begin my own presentation. So this is the FAO definition, Commission on Genetic Resources for Food and Agriculture, of what biodiversity is: the variety of life at genetic, species and ecosystem level. It's a simple definition. It is not as complex as many definitions that you will read, but it is adequate for us in terms of agriculture. And I recommend to you the document that this definition can be found in, which is called The State of the World's Biodiversity for Food and Agriculture, and may be found at that link on the FAO website. Next slide. So that was a a green question mark, and it now is something more interesting than a question mark. But the question is, why is biodiversity so important to us in agriculture? Next slide. Well, it is indispensable to food security and sustainable development, and it supplies many vital ecosystem services, such as healthy soils, which it creates and maintains, pollinating plants and controlling pests. And finally, it provides habitat for wildlife, including for fish and other species that are vital to food production and agricultural livelihoods. Next slide. It makes production systems and livelihoods more resilient to shocks and stresses, including those caused by climate change. And with COP26 going on at the moment in Glasgow, that is very relevant for us to think about, because it will affect us everywhere, not only in Thailand and that region, but globally. It's a key resource in efforts to increase food production while limiting negative impacts on the environment. And let's face it, biodiversity is what we eat in terms of the plants and animals that we find on our tables and in our food bowls when we sit down to enjoy dinner. It makes a variety of contributions to the livelihoods of many people, often reducing the need for food and agricultural producers to rely on costly or environmentally harmful external inputs. So less inputs and less harmful outputs that affect us, our health, but also affect the environment as well. Next slide, please. And finally, biodiversity at genetic, species and ecosystem levels helps to address the challenges posed by diverse and changing economic conditions and socioeconomic circumstances. That's a little bit about that resilience I mentioned. By diversifying production systems, for instance, by using multiple species, breeds or varieties, integrating the use of crop, livestock, forest and aquatic biodiversity, or promoting habitat biodiversity in the local landscape or seascape, we can promote resilience and improve livelihoods and support food security and nutrition for everyone. Next slide, please. But the problem is that biodiversity for food and agriculture is declining. Many of the key components of biodiversity at genetic, species and ecosystem levels are in decline. We utilize over 6,000 species for food, but actually when we look at what we eat on our tables, it's less than 60. It's a 1% of the total. And the proportion of livestock breeds, for instance, at risk of extinction is increasing. And the diversity of crops present in farmers' fields has declined, and threats to crop diversity are increasing. And this is an issue in terms of climate change, for instance. So we need to think about that in terms of how we manage our crops and our livestock. Next slide, please. And biodiversity represents huge economic value. The richer the biodiversity, the greater the chances of medical discoveries, economic development, and adaptation to new challenges like climate change. And data shows that when you work with nature instead of against it, you spend less and can count more on stable yields. Again, that's very important in a changing climate. Knowledge of our natural systems, combined with knowledge of the various threats, can help restore local biodiversity and improve food production. And resilient ecosystems can reduce pests and diseases, including zoonoses, like the current cause of our global pandemic. And there is more in terms of ecosystem services. Next slide, please. So ecosystem services are generally divided into three main groups: provisioning, which includes food, of course, wood for building, medicines, energy, fiber, regulating services, water filtration, waste decomposition, crop pollination, climate regulation, disease control, and cultural services, aesthetic, spiritual, personal growth. And this last one, leisure and fun, is also particularly important to many countries because it represents a source for the tourism industry. And people are increasingly wanting to visit other countries in order to see their biodiversity and their wildlife and to enjoy their agricultural landscapes. Next slide, please. So here are some examples of the ecosystem services that are provided. At least 100 of the commonly grown crops need pollination from bees or other pollinators, so we need to make provisions for those. And biological control agents can reduce costs in integrated pest management. Next slide, please. So what can we actually do about it in relation to food systems? Next slide. The question is, can we have agriculture that includes measures for biodiversity as a component in the production system and continue to maintain production? Next slide, please. And the answer is yes, and there are many names and definitions of the kind of agriculture that we can use. And this reference that I give you here is to an IUCN, International Union for Conservation of Nature document that gives a lot of detail on the different approaches to sustainable agriculture, and I can recommend it as a source document if you are interested in reading more about this field. Next slide. So one example, for instance, is regenerative agriculture, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. It's basically well known in terms of the principles and practice. It delivers lower environmental impact and is beneficial to biodiversity, especially the soil. But it has to be said, not specifically for wildlife, but it still is significantly beneficial in terms of reducing impacts on the environment. And it involves these 5 core principles of minimizing soil disturbance, maximizing crop biodiversity, keeping the soil covered, maintaining a living root all year round, and integrating livestock into the system. Next slide, please. There's nature-based agriculture, which perhaps is more familiar to those in the European subcontinent. It's a form of sustainable agriculture and part of resilient ecosystems and food systems. It uses ecological processes and integrates them into farming practice and directly contributes to the quality of the natural environment itself, producing food within the boundaries set by the environment and having a positive impact on biodiversity. And there's another reference there on the left and a link there if you want to read more about that. Next slide, please. A quick glimpse at the future. There is no doubt that technology can help us towards a lower impact approach, which we might call a circular approach, i.e. less input and less output. This mimics the efficiency of natural systems. It involves the use of techniques such as precision agriculture that are based on remote sensing and allow us to concentrate our inputs more effectively and therefore reduce the outputs. It can also use artificial intelligence and deep machine learning, and many of the big agricultural companies that offer global resources to agricultural producers are now beginning to use these kinds of techniques. Next slide, please. So very quickly, how can you do that yourself? Well, if you wish to, integrate it in your business plan. Make biodiversity a part of that. Take a whole farm approach. Keep your biodiversity plans short and to the point and realistic and doable. Fit them on a map that you can put on a wall in the farm office or the local village. And actually this plan can be a bridge to a sustainable, a wider sustainable approach. Next slide, please. And if you want to think about that natural enrichment, just look at your own landscape. What is it that delivers biodiversity in your own landscape that you can enhance within your own farm management system? Which natural features can you maintain, restore, or create on your farming unit? And thinking can be short-term, medium-term, or even permanent. And nowadays there are many more experts that can give you help in how to deliver this kind of new approach. Next slide, please. And here are some of the ideas that can be applied globally, actually. And one of the most interesting and doable are the strips on the field margins that have wildflowers within them or other flowers that deliver pollination. And this is reasonably easy to do and delivers very big benefits in terms of pest control and pollination. Next, please. Next slide, please. And there is also the potential for permanent natural enrichment. Agroforestry is one possibility, but planting hedges, shelter belts, and other features that sustain natural pests and small-scale biodiversity is hugely beneficial, but also to the farming system. Next slide, please. And if you have water, use it. Use it for agriculture, but also think about it in terms of what it can deliver for the wildlife, the birds and the other animals that populate the landscape. But from a farming perspective, of course, and we may hear this from other speakers, water is vital for maintaining the farming system, but it can deliver so much for biodiversity, and it's very easy to create an integrated approach. Next slide, please. Thank you for your attention. Keep saving biodiversity. And now I want to hand over to our next speaker, Dr. Nutthabordee Chaimanee, who is the Plant Operations Director at Cargill Meats, who is going to talk about biodiversity capital for food security. Thank you. Dr. Nutthabordee. Can we have the next presentation, please?
สวัสดีครับทุกคนได้ยินเสียงผมชัดเจนนะครับ
Yes.
ขอบคุณครับลาบในเรื่องของความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพในเรื่องของต้นทุนความหลากหลายทางชีวภาพเนี่ยที่จะมีความเกี่ยวเนื่องกับความปลอดภัยเรื่องของความยั่งยืนทางด้านอาหารเนี่ยครับเป็นส่วนหนึ่งที่ Cargill Meats Thailand ให้ความสำคัญมากเนื่องจากว่าเราเป็นหนึ่งในผู้ผลิตอาหารแล้วก็เป็นผู้ที่ส่งมอบอาหารให้กับผู้คนนะครับขอสไลด์ถัดไปครับโดยที่ Cargill เองเป็นบริษัทสัญชาติอเมริกันที่มีวัตถุประสงค์ที่จะหล่อเลี้ยงมวลมนุษยชาตินะครับด้วยความปลอดภัย
The world in a safe and responsible and sustainable way. Our focus is on the people or the climate or environment, and then land and water use. At the same time, we are a food producer, a fully integrated food producer from the primary production such as feed production to farming and then food production, and lastly, this is how we deliver our food to our people, which is through distribution and retail. Next slide, please. We start from sourcing our ingredients for feed production, because our feed ingredients, especially the ingredients available around the world, like Dr. Lawrence just shared with you, we only use a few species, a few variants, and this is where we started to see that we cannot really control everything, but at the same time, it is our responsibility to take care of the environment in this aspect. For example, when you think about the feed ingredient sourcing, we normally focus on this diversity without disturbing the environment too much. The feed ingredient that we source, we always look for a source where it doesn't affect the local environment. For example, it doesn't cause deforestation or cause toxics or water pollution. We source our feed ingredient from domestic market and international market. And we normally focus on the source of the production where there's no deforestation, especially. In our country, we also promote no burning after farming, which is burning after harvesting is one of the biggest problems in Thailand for many years, because after the harvest season, the farmer tends to burn the land in order to adjust and improve the soil to prepare for the next crop or the next batch. And at this point, we also have a project or program to source our raw material from the source where they do not cause any harm to the environment. And that from sustainability, let me move a bit closer to the farming practice from the sustainability point of view. We consider ourselves as a partner for our farmers. And we start from providing the knowledge in proper farming practices. And at the same time, we also support them financially, so our farmers can gain access to the source of finance and also to help our farmer to gain access to the market. With this program, it allows our farmer to grow more sustainably, and at the same time, the farmers themselves will be selected by our criteria. First, we want to make sure that their farm doesn't cause any harm to the forest, for example, or they used the land properly, for example. And at the same time, the support we give to our farmers also include knowledge and technology. With that, we will send our experts along with our technology, and we will introduce the technologies to our farmers so they can apply these knowledge and technologies to their farming. And especially when we work with animals which become the source of protein, sometimes if we do not have the right knowledge, there will be a lot of loss in the farming practice, and the loss from the farm also affect the environment heavily. For example, if you have an animal farm, and let's imagine if those animals are eating the food we produce and there are losses in the farm, maybe some of them die or some of them has been spent, it will cause a lot of negative effects to the environment because all the resources haven't been put into good use and didn't yield a result. Now, moving to the next step in the supply chain at the production plant, we also need to think about the production technology. Since the past, in the production practices, in order to convert animal proteins into food, we normally consume a lot of water. With existing technology, it allows us to reduce the water consumption rate in our production, and at the same time, it allows us to reuse the recycled wastewater in our production plant. We also promote the plantation in an area which is closer to our production plant, so we can release the treated used water which has been treated properly, and this water can be a source of water for the farmers who are around our factory. This also helps us promote the diversity around our production plant. And as we have many farmers around our plant, once they have start their farming, the next step is we need to help them to gain access to the market. And that's what I was talking about, the sourcing and the access to market. We sometimes buy these produce back to our production plant, and we can use it in our factory or even in our factory's canteen. This is one of our programs that can help us support the sustainability for our factory and also our farmers around our factory. On the other side, we also consider the technology that help us reduce the greenhouse gas emission. Here it is another place where we put our focus into, and we start installing new technologies. For example, the solar power. The solar power allows us to utilize less fossil fuel energy. On the other hand, we also have the water stewardship program. We start using water from the natural source, and we have prepared a large-sized water reservoir in our areas to help us collect the rainwater during the rainy season, because our production plant, in terms of location, it is not that close to any river. And this is why once we have our own water reservoir and we can acquire lots of water during the rainy season, we can use this water into our production. And once it has passed through the production and then through the treatment system, we can release the water to other sources, and our surrounding community can also use the treated water as well. Now, coming back about the diversity, speaking about protein, because Cargill Meat Thailand is one of the major meat protein producer. In general, we offer chicken-based protein, but again today we started to see that producing just one type of protein is a kind of risk, and that becomes our idea for alternative proteins or plant-based protein. For plant-based protein, we also use lots of varieties of raw materials. By using many types of raw materials, not just animal meat, this is one of a way to help us produce alternative proteins, where we can produce high quality protein for our consumers too. Besides, the logistic is also another very important aspect, because if the logistic is not efficient, it will cause a lot of greenhouse gases to the Earth's atmospheres. So the logistic system is another key for success, especially to reduce the environmental impact and also to promote biodiversity at the same time. Alright, I believe I will stop my presentation here. Let me pass the microphone back to Dr. Lawrence.
Thank you very much indeed, Dr. Nutthabordee, for that interesting presentation. And I'm going to hand over immediately now to Mr. Mahasan Thieravarut, who is Managing Director of Siam Forestry and is going to talk about preserving biodiversity at Siam Forestry. So, Mr. Mahasan, over to you. Thank you.
สวัสดีครับขอสไลด์
All right, let me get the slide on.
Can I get my slide, please? And today, very good afternoon to all of you. I'd like to talk about how to conserve and create biodiversity at Siam Forest. Next, please. For the importance of biodiversity, I was mentioned already by Dr. Rollins. Let me skip this part. The principle that we applied, we look at the 5 threats. As Dr. Lawrence already mentioned, we focus on the sustainability in our value chains, which will be mentioned in the next page. So first of all, I would like to introduce our company. We are in the chain SCG. We are packaging companies. The finished product would be food packaging. The upstream will be eucalyptus farmed forest that we responsible. The woods from our farm has been certified by ISCA Seed. we've been certified and we manage the farms or the forest sustainably. According to the sustainable farm management, we need to have a conserve forest, not only the conserve forest that we need to have at least 10% of the total forest, and then we have to manage, we have to create biodiversity at our conserved forest, and we manage on biodiversities, plant diversities, and animal diversities. And today I'd like to share to you how we conserved our forest at Kamphaeng Phet province or KPP, which covered 189 hectare. This is a photo of our location, which is the forest that we conserve. In the middle, that you can see a lot of green trees. In our area, we surrounded by small holders, the small farmers, and rice fields, mango farms, bamboo farms, also ditches, and the village ditch or canals. So the place where the villagers use the sort of the area, and we have eucalyptus farmed in our area. So you can see that our forest located close to the neighboring sort of communities. And how we manage the our farms, we apply the HCV, high conservation values assessment. We evaluate the plant, we evaluate the animals. For plant evaluation, plant-based evaluation, we have to look if we have any important plant and how much density. And in terms of animal, we divide the animals into 4 groups. And when we do a survey, what species are they? And we focused on, we recognize the importance as shown here, IUCN, the risk, we look at status like it's sort of high risk to distinction, and this is the extinction. This is the animal groups that we really attach the importance on. In terms of plant, we have done surveys, and we found that there are trees in our forest. If you look at the graph, let's say from small trees to mature trees in x-axis, it's the growth. So this is the L-shaped sort of graph. You can see that we have small trees that are ready to grow. There are a lot of small trees which are ready to grow. And below you can see there are 4 type of plant varieties under IUCN, like the different sort of a different kind of the trees that we have to give or pay attention, special attention. In terms of animals, we made surveys. There are birds or reptiles or mammals, and also the amphibians animals. So we have done surveys. What species are they? Mostly are birds, and there's no sort of tend to be extinct sort of species. So once we have conduct the surveys, we try to once we gather all the data, we try to analyze and see what we can do. So we look at the HCV. We are in HCV level 5, basic needs. So what we need to do, we have to utilize the sort of the area together with our neighboring communities. In the photo shows that the villagers and the people in the communities can come to the forest to get the sort of to find food, like the ant eggs, or they try to collect some sort of plants. And we have the meeting with the communities. We have to raise awareness what they can do, what they cannot do in the forest, and we grow the trees in as shown here. We have to sort of grow more trees, as I already mentioned to you. Next, please. In summary, So from our activities, we have surveyed the biodiversities in the year 2027, in the year 2017, and we do comparison between 2017 and 2020. We have more species. We can see the richness of the forest. So this is my sharing from Siam Forestry, how we manage the biodiversities. Let me hand over to Dr. Lawrence. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Mahasan. That was an inspiring presentation in terms of what is possible for biodiversity. And I'm sure everybody that saw that was highly motivated by the potential that you offer through the management that you implement. I notice that now we have some questions, and I'm going to pose them to you both. The first one is, do we need modern biotechnology to revert the biodiversity trend? And I will ask Dr. Nutthabordee to come in on that question first. Do we need modern biotechnology to revert the biodiversity trend? Dr. Nutthabordee, would you like to come back on that question?
Speaking of technology, I think this is very crucial. It's very crucial because in many decades ago, we consume food, or we sort of consume a sort of specific type of raw material, and that's why we lost the balance. So technology can help us to improve what we have missed and recovered the part that, or the segment that we missed. If we wait or if we use any particular process that lacks of biotechnology, if we do not use biodiversity to recover or to remedize what we missed in the past, and we cannot get the recovered the biodiversities as fast as it should.
Thank you for that. Mr. Mahasan, what is your response?
Yes, for us, we have used biotechnology and to do breeding, to do eucalyptus breeding, and with our competencies, we try to expand the varieties, and which is going to be extinct, or we have a small numbers of those trees, so that we can expand more trees, and we work together with different communities, or even we work with the government authorities or Department of Forestry.
And I think therefore the answer is yes, we do need modern technology, and it can really help us a lot. And I would certainly support that in terms of some of the techniques that we now have, particularly the remote sensing as well, that allow us to deliver a more effective means for managing the agricultural land that we have. I have a second question here, this one to Dr. Nutthabordee. How difficult is it for Cargill to convince farmers to stop burning land after harvest, and how do you manage to convince them to change practice?
This is the big challenge, since our Thai farmers in many areas, their lack of knowledge and their lack of awareness, and they did not have a good understanding on biodiversity, and they don't really recognize the importance of the richness of the nature, and it will impact to the younger generation in the next ages. This challenge cannot be we cannot change the farmers' sort of mindset in a short time. So in each state, we have to motivate them. We have to motivate the farmers. We use the approach. We try to convince the farmers by apply the market-led approach. So a marketing-led approach, and because it could impact directly to the farmers. So we try to raise that awareness. So once we if they burn the forest, if they burn the crops, if they destroy the environment, they can sell less of their productivities, or they cannot get the good price of their productivities that they need. So this is one part. This is one of the motives that we try to convince them. In the meantime, in parallel, we try to enhance, we try to promote the good understanding among farmers so that they will understand why they should not burn the crops after they harvested the yield, the agricultural yield. So we have to work in parallel. Both we support we provide the financial support. We help them to access to the market, and they can live their lives together with providing that knowledge to those farmers. This is how we sort of can sustain. This is how we can sustain the Thai farmers. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Mr. Mahasan. Would you like to reflect on that, and also to follow up perhaps by answering question 3, or what do you recommend as an efficient mechanism for small farmers to implement more sustainable agriculture? Over to you, Mr. Mahasan.
First of all, I'd like to talk about burning the crops. We work together with the factories. We work with the factories to change the byproducts, the agricultural byproduct, to be sort of biomass or fuel. Like, let's say, like sugar cane leaves, most of the grower or the farmers will burn the sugar cane leaves. So we work with the factories to buy back the sugar cane leaves. So rather than let the farmers burn the sugar cane leaves, we take those leaves back and use as a biomass, a fuel, to replace the coal. This is a project that we already implemented. And for the how we can make the smallholders manage the farm sustainably, this is our way of working. So how we can work together with the communities. I think that they should not work as the farmer should not work for the single or the big plot. So we try to encourage them to grow many crops in one plot. Let's say 3 types of varieties or 3-4 crops, in order to build or develop the biocides in the plot. And this is how we can balance the good price, because the agricultural products price are so volatile. If they grow many crops in their plot, they can manage and they're not going to suffer about the on the volatile or unstable sort of crop price. And they don't need to use the pesticides. And we support like eucalyptus plot in the first year. When our eucalyptus tree is still small, we ask the farmers to grow cassava in the middle plot in the eucalyptus farm. Like a year later, they can harvest cassava, and then once they harvest cassava, the eucalyptus tree grow already. So. And they can gain many income sources, and they can live well, and they can grow sort of different crops, or our recommend crops. By principle, I would like the farmers do not grow one crops in big plot, and they should grow different crops in their field. Thank you.
And are you able to monitor that approach, Mr. Mahasan, and to see how effective it is?
Yes, for our members, we call them FIIS group members. We visit them. We visit our members regularly, let's say a couple of months, once in every 2-3 months, and we will see and how they comply with our requirement. FIIS members, whether or not they comply with our requirement, we kind of audit them and we try to look whether they follow our steps and if they work consistently. And as we already notified them at the beginning, if there are any deviation, we have to fine tune together, so that we have to make sure that they follow our requirement. So 80 to 90% of the members have done what we expected.
Excellent, excellent. We've got around 8 minutes left for the session, and I've just got a couple of concluding questions that I would like to ask you both. I think for Mr. Mahasan, you mentioned that you take the byproducts and use them as biomass fuel from the agriculture. To me, that sounds like the beginnings of a circular approach. Can you see that being the future for agriculture, particularly in the way that you manage your operations?
Yes, I think that in the future, we see a lot of opportunities, because right now, let me give you the example of sugarcane leaves. We use less than 5%. We leverage less than 5% of the sugarcane leaves. Let's say more than 90% of the sugarcane leaves were burned without any management. If we manage the sugarcane leaves very well, let's say starting from the collecting all the sugarcane leaves from the beginning at the upstream, or use those leaves at the factories. Let's say for the whole chain, these supply chain need to be well managed so everyone can gain the benefits. This is a very big opportunity for us. And we know that the coal fuel price spring up a lot, and people prefer to use biomass. Let's say all countries are interested to use biomass, and we can see big opportunity here.
That is a very, very interesting and positive perspective on the future, and I think it, to a certain extent, answers one of the questions we got here about that the circular approach makes things more complicated, but it can work if you have the desire to make it work. So thank you for that. And Mr. Nutthabordee, I would like to ask you how you see the future development of sustainable agriculture from your perspective.
For the sustainable agriculture, I think that is to sort of combine or integrate the technology. We have to integrate technology in our production line. The technology that I said, it's not only about the machineries only, but I would like to talk about how we use the data to analyze. How we analyze the data, how we analyze big data. And that's going to be the key to do analysis, to analyze the agriculture and to improve the agriculture, to be able to improve the productivity. We will reduce using the resource and reduce the cost, production cost. And another point, we can analyze we get the data analysis in order to understand the negative impact, negative impact towards the environment, and this is the first step. We already progressed that. I think that in the same situation like at Cargill, Thailand, there are many companies try to work on this, and this could be the future that we can see. In not more than 5 years, we can see the progress. We can see a big move on this clearly in the near future.
Thank you. And that comment that you make about more companies taking this approach, as a final word, can I come back to Mr. Mahasan and ask him, are there others who are practicing similar approaches to Siam Forestry in Thailand and in the region?
ก็เท่าที่
As far as I know, I think most companies, if they comply with FIIS, they follow these procedures. But talking about technologies, different technologies, I think that we are pioneer. We are the leaders to adopt different technologies. For example, like remote sensing that Dr. Lawrence already mentioned. We can monitor the farms. We can monitor our forest in different areas nationwide in real time. And then we also you apply different technologies to survey the edges of the trees and using the drone to manage or survey the soil or the farms. So we will have more efficient, we can manage the farm more efficiently, and this is how we can reduce the cost and sustain our supply chain.
Excellent. And I notice that we've had a final question here about global warming. How will it affect biodiversity? Would either of you like to come back on that? Perhaps Mr. Nutthabordee first and then Mr. Mahasan, and then we'll close the session very quickly. Mr. Nutthabordee.
I believe the global warming situation it really impact to the environment, but at least we can observe the change, the season change. Let's say in each season. In the past, when you look at the season change in the past and present, you can see that so big change, it's so clear change, right? And it impacts the layer of the production, the value chain. Let's say the sun sort of really impact to the growth of each type of plant. And it impact consistently. It really impact to the plant for animals. And for non-commercial farm can be impact clearly, including the animals in the forest or in the woods. They're being impact so clearly. And I'm not gonna limit only those are on the lives in the land or in the forest. I would like to include the sort of the animals in the sea or ocean or rivers. All type of animals has been impacted. This is one of our target. Our Cargill Meet Thailand objectives to reduce the impact on climate change. And one way that we would like to do, we try to reduce the carbon emissions that emit to the atmosphere from our production line. This is our goal that we set up the target. We set up the aggressive target. Thank you.
Very much indeed. Well, we've got 1 minute left, so a very short answer from Mr. Mahasan, please, and then I will close the session.
I think talking about global warming, it really impacts definitely to the biodiversity. For example, like flood situation, right? The animals or the plant in our area been impacted and some can disappear. But we are confident if we manage, if we are so committed to promote to increase biodiversity. I think that the increasing biodiversity can really help reduce the global warming at the end. Thank you.
I would like to thank you very much for that answer, and I'd like to thank both our speakers for your excellent presentations and the wonderful depth that you were able to give us with your answers, which is both inspiring and gives us a picture of the future that we can really hope for. I think in conclusion, I would say without biodiversity, we cannot have food security globally or regionally. And that is clear from what you've told us. So thank you both very much indeed. And I look forward to doing this again one day. Thank you both. And goodbye to our audience. Thank you very much indeed.